Good evening, I'm Jamie Ho. Budget 2020 has just been announced, and with me tonight is Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat, and he'll help unpack some of the announcements that he made yesterday. DPM Heng, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. With us tonight as well are four friends. Singaporeans may have Miss Julie Cheong. She works in a hotel and is also a union leader.
Yes.
Mr. Taufik Yahya, he's the owner of a business that provides enrichment classes for kids and also a father of five. Mr. Yuvan Mohan, who is a youth leader and volunteer, he works in a bank. And Ms. Junie Fu, who heads a welfare organization and serves on several charities. Welcome and thank you. I'm sure we'll all have many questions for the DPM this evening, and so will I. But I will take the prerogative as host to ask the first one, perhaps.
Sure.
DPM is quite clear as we looked at your budget that you were trying to deal with really large, long-term transformational issues as usual in your budget.
Right.
You did some of that. But of course, most people will also focus on the short-term issue of COVID-19. And we saw that you devoted quite a big part of your budget in the beginning to that as well.
Right.
But unpack for us what your thinking was in the sums that were involved and the sectors that were involved in trying to help them overcome this particular outbreak. So we had $4 billion for businesses, another $1.6 billion for individuals, amounting to quite a big sum of money. And if you compare that to SARS, where the sums people were talking about was about $230 million, so the headline figures are quite stark in that regard. But is that a signal of the seriousness that the government saw and took as it relates to COVID-19? Is it really that much more serious, or are situations just different now? Perhaps you could just explain that.
Well, COVID-19 will have a significant impact on Singapore as well as on the global economy. And our first priority really is to take care of our people, to reduce the risk of further infection, and to work with the global community for us to do that well. And therefore, a big part of the budget has to do with supporting our frontline agencies, because our frontline officers have been working really hard. And so I've allotted $800 million to our frontline agencies, especially the Ministry of Health, because we want them to win this fight. And this is one significant bit. Now, at the same time, the economy has already been hit. Some sectors more so than others. And in our model, we notice that there are different tiers of the economy which will be affected. The most directly affected are aviation and tourism. And then, of course, you have food and beverage, retail, as well as the point-to-point transport. So there is a cascading effect. But even sectors like, say, manufacturing are also affected because the global supply chain today is much more integrated. China today accounts for a larger part of the global economy than it did during SARS. And at the same time, our supply chains, our activities with China has been significantly more than during 2003. So this package has a number of tiers. One is to make sure that we're able to protect our people well. Two, to provide immediate stabilization. Hence the stabilization program to stabilize the economy, to make sure that we give a sufficient fiscal boost, and as well as to support the sectors which are most directly affected. And then, of course, some of it to make sure that we are able to support our households.
Well, talking about the sectors that were affected, I mean, we're lucky to have Julie here with us as well. Julie works in a hotel and she also represents the labour sector.
Yes.
Give us a sense, because we don't often get a sense of how it's like really on the ground with the hotel and the people who work for hotels. What was it like? And now that they've seen the budget measures, what's the sense?
Well, basically the union is really very grateful when the budget measures were announced. It's to our own term, layman term, it's heavily subsidized. We see the dollar and cents, right? But I have a question for you as well. It's what if COVID-19 is to be protracted? Is there any supplementary budget that we are looking at?
Well, we do not know how severe and how long this outbreak will be. And therefore, what our current assessment is that what we are doing now is appropriate for this occasion. But as I said in the budget, we can and are prepared to do more if the situation warrants it. It is important that we stay calm and that we stay prepared. And if there's any further needs, we will do something.
That's good to hear,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear that. That's,
Yes.
that's very
Particularly-
assuring for the workers.
Yes, well, Secretary General and the union leaders have said every worker matters.
Yes,
and our
exactly.
priority is to look after all our workers.
Yes.
Well, if you bring Taufik and Yuval in as well, because as DPM has said, the intention is to keep it quite broad and to keep everyone protected. But in your sense, you guys may have a view on some of the things that maybe, as it stands now, not as well protected or not seen in this particular first tranche of the help. What's your take, Taufik, maybe?
Well, for us, actually, we as Julia has mentioned, we are actually very grateful with the budget that is being set or the way set aside for this for the COVID-19. So it's actually more expansionary than we thought it would be.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think we share the same concerns as well. What if it's going to be on a longer term? But at the same time as well, we believe that companies having the support that is getting for the next few months will be able to at the same time protect the jobs of the that they have right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yuval?
Apart from companies and SMEs, Minister, how about individuals who are participating in the gig economy? These are individuals of gig economy.
Yes.
These are photographers, musicians who rely on events for their income. But we see a lot of cancellation of events. As a result, their income has drastically fallen.
Right.
So as a result, how would this budget help them in the short term as well throughout the year as well?
Yeah. So some of the help, in fact, a large part of the help goes to protecting jobs and working with the companies. But at the same time, there are also household support measures for households. So from GST vouchers and as well as the special payment to every individual. Those are the measures that we can take at this point. In terms of the gig economy, there are quite a wide range. So for example, taxi drivers and private car hire operators, there's been very good work between the operators as well as with the union in working together on that. So segment by segment, these are being helped. But in terms of other areas, if you're completely freelance,
Yeah, correct.
then there may be a bit more difficulty in reaching out to everybody because some are doing part-time, some are doing full-time. Yeah. So we'll have to look at it more carefully, but it's not possible within a short time to say I cover everybody, but the one that covers everybody is certainly the household support packages and individual support measures.
Taufik, if I could ask you as well, because I mean, you run child enrichment classes business. How has it affected you so far? I mean, I know it's just been a couple of weeks, but have you already seen some effects on your business and parents and how they approach it?
Definitely in terms of the manpower, we are having a manpower crunch because every time, I mean, we have teachers from overseas and from China. So when they just got returned, they have their LOA that they need to serve.
Yes.
At the same time as well, I think when our staff fall sick, they are on a 5 days MC. So we actually have having quite a big issue in terms of getting the manpower that we need. So far, we have not seen any kind of withdrawals from parents. I mean, they still need the services that we provide. But yeah, it's mainly the manpower.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, the 5-day MC allowance that has been implemented, I would imagine would sort of, I wouldn't say hurt, but affects the smaller companies probably proportionately a little bit more than the larger companies who may be able to absorb that.
Yeah.
Do you guys hear that kind of concern?
I think I work in a MNC. For us, we are able to do split operations so that we are able to support. And I think one thing that's really helped is how digital our work has become.
Right.
So you're able to work from home, you're able to work remotely. And so that has really alleviated certain challenges that we would have faced. So I think while it was and is still a concern, I think it's really mitigated with the use of technology.
Junie, how about you? I mean, in your volunteer work, you run services. Do you hear people getting more concerned about retrenchments as well? And have they asked you to ask the DPM any questions as far as the package is concerned?
Well, they want me to say that it's a very comprehensive budget. They feel that it's quite people-centered as well. So
Yes.
they were pleasantly surprised, I must say. But of course, in the social services sector, especially where the Family Services Centre is concerned, we are prepping ourselves to look at maybe some medium-term social impact that would come about due to the retrenchments. Unfortunately, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a reality that some of the smaller outfits may choose to close down or take the opportunity to maybe cut staff and cut costs, and there will be retrenchments.
Right.
Yeah.
But Junie, your point about preparing ourselves for events ahead, I think that is a very wise thing to do, because I think we should, while we deal with the immediate challenges, we should also think a few steps ahead.
Yes.
And in that regard, on Jamie's earlier question about for the smaller establishments, how have they been affected? Now, I've been working on the economic side with our trade associations and chambers, and I've always been advocating to them that even while firms compete in order to differentiate themselves, there are also opportunities to come together to solve common challenges. And the point that both of you made is interesting, that in a multinational, you have more buffer to be able to deal with that. But if you are running a smaller operation, the buffer will be smaller. And the question is, how can we work together with companies in a similar industry or even a slightly different industry, but get together and say, how can we help one another? Because there will be sectors which such a arrangement can be helpful. So we got to be creative about thinking about it. And it's very good that even the social services agencies are thinking about, well, what if this happened, then what do we do?
Well, that's a great point you raised there, DPM. I really wish we had more time to talk about COVID-19, but we have to go for a very short break. Keep all those thoughts in mind as we go to the second segment where we talk about the Singapore economy at large. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you.
Welcome back to this post-2020 budget discussion with Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat and my studio guests. DPM Heng, I mean, we spent the last segment talking about the immediate challenge of COVID, but I think you also took pains during your speech to talk about the larger structural and global challenges that we face as well. The US-China trade tensions are not fully resolved, if at all. You talked about the pushback against globalization. There's now talk about a lowering of our growth forecast for the year.
Right.
So the overall environment is probably slightly challenging, to say the least.
Yes, it is.
But over the course of your past budgets, you've also always spoken about this digital transformation and entrenching Singapore's role as a global Asia node for technology.
Yes.
Tell us why you felt the need to talk about it progressively over these past few budgets, how it's evolved, and maybe unpeg some of the concepts. Because it's probably useful to talk about it in terms of opportunities for workers and for industries, as well as challenges, of course, because we're going to talk about how workers can adapt to that. But unpeg this whole transition to digital economy and the big picture transformation that you're talking about during the budget.
So the short-term stabilization and support package is, if you imagine ourselves on a boat and you see a big wave coming, the stabilization and support package is to make sure that we can get over this big wave. But getting over the big wave is important, but if you go over the big wave and the boat turns course and you lose your sense of direction, that will be even more troublesome in the years ahead. And therefore, we must do both at the same time. And the way to do that is to make sure that we are able to continue our longer-term trajectory of transforming our economy. Now, globally, technology and innovation is going to drive many of the changes. Now, with the advances in our technology on various fronts, from biotechnology to digital technology, the world will be a very different place. Now, would it be a plus for Singapore? I think so, because what we have are people, and very skilled people, very well educated, and over the years this has been getting better and better. Now with that, and with technology as an important multiplier, with innovation as an important multiplier, the Singapore economy can continue to stay vibrant, and that we can continue to create good jobs for our people. And with an aging population, I've been looking at technology that can help senior workers to continue to do good work. For instance, I went to a logistics company, and this senior used to do the heavy work, but with technology, he now has an exoskeleton. There's another one where he was, instead of operating, carrying heavy stuff, he was operating a computer to get the robots to do some of this work. So he not only can continue his work in logistics, and his previous background and experience was helpful, but he could do it at a much higher level of productivity. So those are the changes that we must make, and a key part of that is to ensure that our workers have all the right skills to do that, and hence a big emphasis in this budget on skills upgrading, on skills future, on encouraging our people to continue with lifelong learning. And not only that, we have companies too.
Yeah, I mean, Yuvan and I were having a conversation off air just now. One of the very interesting things that we talked about was deep tech and the focus on deep tech in the budget, and Singapore government's focus on equity for startups.
Yes.
It raised a few questions, so maybe Yuvan.
So, Minister, I mean, looking at the past two budgets, there's
Yes.
been increased focus on startups. But it seems to me that we are actually choosing which startups to focus on. It has been largely focusing on fintech, in the biospace, in the pharmaceutical industries. But startups are very broad and they're very niche in areas as well. Is it fair to do such cherry picking of which industries you want to focus on at such an early stage?
Yeah. No, in fact, the government does not cherry pick which industries are likely to grow and which are not, because we can't tell. But what we do is two things. One is that Startup SG Equity, for instance, is quite neutral about which ones will grow, which ones will not. But at the same time, we notice that you have a certain set of activities which are growing very strongly, and one of which, for instance, is fintech. And in the fintech space, MAS as a regulator has over the years been also a promoter of financial services. So they saw the opportunities in the new development. If we are able to put in the right regulations, if we are able to be among the first to do this, it will have a significant impact for the Singapore economy and indeed for the global economy. And so therefore, they have been organizing this FinTech Festival. And our FinTech Festival is now the largest in the world. So with that, quite naturally, many more startup capital will come here and they will look at that. And the other area which we do put a focus on the deep tech is that we have also been investing significantly in R&D. And some of this R&D are to solve very major challenges for Singapore. For instance, urban solutions and sustainability. We are just one little island and we want to keep this island vibrant, sustainable. But if we can have solutions in Singapore that are useful for a city, there are many cities in the world, and therefore those solutions can be deployed globally, and hence that emphasis.
So the question, DPM, is preparing our workers as well to be able to ride that wave. So maybe Julie and Judy, I think maybe we have some perspective on this as to whether our workers are prepared. Give us some perspective on the Skills Future announcements that the DPM made. Did you have any views on that?
Well, definitely training kicks in, like we've discussed in the earlier sessions as well with Jamie. Training is upskilling, in fact. It's very important to every single workers, like every workers matter. And it also helps to prepare them when the economy bounce back. Yes. They are able to ride on the wave as well,
yes.
you know, to do better job, better productivity at the end of the day. And I would also like to highlight that besides government putting in all the heavily subsidized packages, which again I'm very grateful, the union is also putting in extra effort to see how we can help our workers on the ground, as well as go through this tough time with our management partners. So unionized companies under FDAW can be quite rest assured that we are working closely with them. And we hope that we can solve any issues that they may want to tell us about the businesses or the sustainability of what they're doing.
So that's very good, because I think in the budget I announced a number of measures. One is to enable our individuals, so that individuals can take ownership of their learning and they have the Skills Future credit. And for the senior workers, for those 40 to 60, they get even more. The second is really enterprise. That our enterprises, I have a Skills Future credits for enterprises, because as our enterprises transform, it's important that they also take effort to reskill and retrain their workers and redesign jobs. And in that way, the more capable workers can help the firm succeed. When the firm succeed, they can then pay the workers better. So we must aim for this virtuous cycle. And of course, our tripartite system has been working very well over the years, and therefore working together. And I think Singapore has a great strength in that our unions do not just oppose change, but in fact our unions understand the need for change and get our workers on board these changes. So by working together, we can achieve more.
Taufik, if I could then bring it to you, because you own a little business and you're a boss yourself. As you look at this talk of training and the use of Skills Future, how easy is it for you? And will you have any feedback on its applicability, the ability for you to just send your staff for training, especially when, as you say, things may be a bit uncertain?
So I think over the years there has been a emphasis on lifelong learning, and Skills Future has definitely assisted us as an organisation to actually increase the competency of our staff. One thing that we are also hoping in terms of the budget is that we want to actually encourage Singaporeans to consistently train and upgrade their skills. Will the government actually consider having a yearly top-up for the Skills Future credit rather than a one-off thing, so that they can actually constantly having the opportunity to actually upgrade themselves?
Well, we'll have to consider how this effort goes. The last few years since we started the Skills Future credits, about 49% of Singaporeans have made use of that $500. So we hope that the take-up this time will be higher. And that's why I have a 5-year limit. So it is to encourage everyone to take action early. So we'll have to consider how else we can do it, both as a government as well as for companies to come together with us. I should add that many courses in our IHLs are already heavily subsidized.
We don't have much time left, but I know Junie may have a take on this as far as the applicability of Skills Future to perhaps slightly older people.
Yes, so right now it's 40 to 50, but if you want to attract and continue to have the fit seniors work in the workforce, maybe we can push it up to above 60. Yeah, so widen the age limit so that more of the able above 60 can
be reskilled.
Yes. And I think they want to, because I've been speaking to quite a number of them.
I see. Well, thank you for the feedback. Let me study this.
Okay, yes, please.
But we hope also that even those seniors who choose to retire can also make use of Skills Future and to learn anything that's interesting to them. And keep yourself active, keep learning.
It's a good way to end. We've got to go for a very short break. We'll go for a very short break, but when we come back, we'll talk about a little bit more hot button issues and the cost of living. Welcome back to this post-budget 2020 discussion with me, my guests, and Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat. DPM Heng, we were talking about quite big picture economic issues and COVID-19 in the last two segments. But as you did in your budget speech, let's talk a little bit more about measures that the government has put in place to help with cost of living issues, as you said during the speech. But I also want to take the opportunity to congratulate Taufik, because I don't know whether you all know, he's a proud father of a 2-week-old, which is the 5th in his family now. So congratulations. But it's a good reason why I raised that, because I would imagine, as you did, DPM, in your speech, quite put some focus on the needs of families.
Yes.
So he does have a rather big family. So I suppose you will have sort of a view on the range of support measures that the government has rolled out over the past couple of years, plus this most recent one, the care and support package. How do you see it? And do you think more could be done? Of course, always more could be done, but constructively, do you think government has covered its bases?
Well, there are a few areas, I guess, definitely we are very grateful for. In my opinion, the Singapore government has been generous in providing support for the childcare services in the early childhood. So to further to further give parents more peace of mind, I'm wondering whether the government will consider in providing more support or subsidy for families to afford student care service in the primary school level.
Yeah. So in fact, the subsidies for our children, for our parents rather, to look after the kids, have gone up significantly over time. And I mentioned that, you mentioned about a preschool. So our preschool subsidies is now over $1 billion, and that in a few years you go up to 2 billion, because we want to encourage our families to ensure that the children have a good preschool. And then in school, our primary school is free, our secondary school, they pay $5 and a few dollars of miscellaneous fees. So I think if we look at the support for raising our kids, it is easily in the region of over 50,000 in the first few years before they start school. And then from primary to secondary school, the 10 years is about 130,000. So altogether, quite a significant subsidy, over 180,000. Now, student care, in fact, when I was in MOE, we tried to encourage schools to also build student care in the school, because in that way, you can make full use of the facilities in the school, and the children will make it easier for the children as well. And many of our schools now have that. And those two have been quite highly provided for, because they're using the school premises. So in terms of actual needs, we'll have to look at it more carefully as to what else can be done on that front. But at the same time, I want to also thank many of our self-help groups, because they have been doing a lot. And in this budget, I've also given extra funds for them to do more. And I hope that the whole society can come together to help families with additional needs.
Well, that's a good point, which maybe I'll bring in Junie as well, because she does run an organization meant precisely to do that. But as you go about day to day, again, your recipients of the help that you provide would have seen the measures that have been rolled out over the years, plus this one. What kind of feedback are you getting?
We do see income disparity. I mean, we will say it like it is. So
Yes.
there is income disparity, and I'll probably be the one to ask a courageous question about whether we will consider at some point maybe a minimum wage model. I know we do wear our progressive wage model with pride, but to really tackle the issue of basic needs, maybe there should be a floor where people can get really basic salaries. It's not about profiteering. Right. It's not about just giving somebody $800 and think that the person can survive on that. So perhaps it's something that we can consider.
Yes. Well, we've actually looked at the various ways in which this can be done, and one approach, of course, is to have a minimum wage for everybody. But the experience has been that while the objective is good, the question is, can it be done in a much better way? And the progressive wage model that we have, as well as the efforts to put more resources into skills future for our people to be able to build up the skills and therefore be even more productive and be able to do more, is a very important long-term strategy, which is going to be much more sustainable. And that is why we have been careful in looking at how we can do this various measures that can be sustained. Because one of the major challenges that we must never forget is that our population is also aging, and therefore our labor force will be coming down. And if we are not careful about, and what it means is that the ability of those who are working to pay more taxes to support those who are not working will come down over time. And we really don't want to impose a big burden on our future generations. And that is why we have been very fortunate that we have been able to tap, for example, on the net investment returns contribution to fund many of these activities. So the question always is this an idea that can be implemented in a sustainable way over the long term? And is this the best way? The simplest way may not usually be the best.
Maybe since you raised the issue of aging society as well, EPF, maybe I use that as a segue to talk about, maybe on behalf of some of us, because a lot of us have aging parents as well, and you have rolled out measures quite specific to them in the past, as well as this budget. Paint for us a picture of what the overall support mechanism that you want all elderly Singaporeans to have for peace of mind in terms of retirement. It does seem sometimes, from budget to budget, everyone focuses on what's delivered at that particular budget. But if we paint a bigger picture for all people over 40, 50 years old, 60 years old, because that's where our parents are, what's your message to them?
Well, so if you look at the key measures over the last several years, the one big part of it, Pioneer Generation Package and the Merdeka Generation Package, provides a very significant support for our seniors. And many of our seniors in those early years had less education. The job prospect was not as good, so therefore their earnings were not as strong. So those packages are very important for some peace of mind for that the healthcare will be well taken care of. And in fact, the major item of major ministry in which healthcare, in which expenses will keep going up, is the Ministry of Health. And that is why I have many meetings with Minister Gan in order to make sure that we are able to manage this well and to prepare for this. And so that's one aspect of it. The other is that our seniors of that generation are fortunate in that they grew up at a time when the economy was taking off, and that almost all of them would own a HDB flat. And the HDB flat's value has appreciated. And I announced in the budget that we'll look at how some of our seniors who, if they want to, can tap on the housing asset as an asset which they can use. Then, of course, we have been working on making sure that as many of our people have a basic retirement sum. And in that regard, the money in the CPF earns a fairly high interest rates, much more than what you can get risk-free in any banking product or any financial product. So that provides an important source of financing. And at the same time, this budget, I had a match retirement savings scheme, so that anyone can contribute to that to help seniors build up enough for that source. So from healthcare to education to retirement savings, these are important bits of it. And the one important change in this budget is that for those of 40 to 60, I think being able, and the raising of retirement age and re-employment age means that for those who choose to, you can work longer, earn more, save more, and then your children can do the match retirement savings, or even others can provide for match retirement savings.
Well, I have to raise this because Julie and Taufik and I were having a discussion before we came to air about their mothers as well, because their mothers are of that age where they do need some help. And I would be remiss not to help them raise the issue with UDPM. So maybe Julie suggest for us what the issue is.
Well, we all agree that medical expenses are not cheap here in Singapore. Everybody knows that. And of course, my mom has a health issue, and I'm glad that she's recovering right now. And is there any way that, with all the MediSave or MediShield that we have, is there any way that when they do follow-ups, right? Because now when you do follow-ups, you can only use it for certain chronic diseases, if I'm not wrong, correct? So is there any way that can make you tap on it and can use it for any kinds of follow-up that they do?
Right.
Yeah, so it lightens the load of the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are various things that we are doing to ensure that we can contain our healthcare costs. And in fact, Minister Gan Kim Yong and his team are working very hard to look at what else we can do to transform our healthcare system. In many places, when they get the policies wrong, you'll find that the outcome may be worse than what was intended. So for instance, the significant emphasis now on preventive care, significant emphasis on primary care, and bringing many of our primary care clinics into this network is one major area. And we are also very fortunate that our public health system is of a very, very high quality. And at the same time, we have started pooling the purchase of drugs in this system, and that allows us to also help to contain the cost of drugs. So there are all these major measures that are being taken. Then at the same time, we have the 3M framework. We have and MediShield Life is an important part of that work. We have also provided for this in intermediate long-term care. So if we look at all the various options, there are now many options to help families. But the key emphasis that we hope to make is stay healthy, because that's where keeping our community network for seniors, for example, encouraging our people to stay active is very useful. In Japan, for example, people work longer and they stay healthier, because work is not just about earning money, it's also about having a social network, having a sense of purpose. And whether you choose to work or choose to volunteer, staying active is a very important part of that. And taking whatever action we can to keep ourselves healthy. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Taufik, I apologize, we don't have time, but let's take this offline with the DPM at the end of this show. We have one more segment left. When we come back, we'll talk about the long-term future of Singapore. Welcome back to this discussion with Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat on Budget 2020. DPM Heng, we've been talking in the last 3 segments about all sorts of issues, from COVID-19 to economic restructuring and now to cost of living. But let's talk big picture now. Let's try and talk about really long-term issues. And the first one I want to talk about is climate change. So obviously it's been an issue that you've raised in past budgets before.
Yes.
PM Lee has hinted that it will cost something in the range of $100 billion for 100 years in adapting to climate change. And in this budget, you also said that you put aside $5 billion for coastal and flood protection.
Yes.
So because I didn't give Taufik enough time for the question at the end of the last segment, I'm going to ask him the question, and maybe he can pose a question to DPM Heng.
Yes.
Because you are father of 5 young children who will be around for a long time to come. Are you confident in the measures that the government has put in place, both in terms of adaptation to climate change as well as mitigation? And if there's anything more that you want the government to do, your chance now.
Yeah, I think a lot of the focus has been on the adaptation of climate change. So, and we have seen the impact on climate change over the last few years. And I welcome the government's efforts to mitigate and to tackle the issue, like the having the vehicles running on cleaner energy by 2040. But my question would be, is there more that we can do to actually mitigate this critical issue of climate change, rather than just looking at adapting on the impact of it? Is there something that we can do to actually make sure that climate change will come, mitigate it as much as possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the key part of it is that we need a global consensus on this, because climate change, Singapore contributes 0.11% to the carbon footprint, and therefore, but still, we faced the threat, and we must do something, and I hope that we can bring the global community together. The Minister Masagos is very involved in these discussions, and of course, the Singapore team is very well involved in the UN framework on climate change. So, the Minister in the Prime Minister's office, Senior Minister Teo, will issue a statement during the Committee of Supplies on our commitment to the Paris Agreement. So we must do our part. But I hope that the global community will also do their part. Every country, every nation need to support this. Then the question is, individually, what can we do? And I mentioned about, yes, we can do something ourselves, because the choices we make shapes the carbon footprint. So let's all try. And Minister Masagos will be announcing a series of measures on what we can do in our own personal choices. And you mentioned green vehicle. That's clearly one of the things that we want to do. And at the same time, we want to also encourage the companies in Singapore, our research institutes in Singapore, to look at what we can do to contribute to this effort. a lot of our research goes into urban solutions and sustainability. How can we keep a city running with a lower carbon footprint and keep it green and livable?
Maybe I could ask Yuvan to jump in too, because one of the biggest constituencies in this raising of awareness in climate change is the youth and the young of the world. You see the likes of Greta Thunberg making her point. You are a youth mentor as well. What's the kind of reactions you've been getting from the young Singaporeans on the measures that DPM Heng has rolled out in past years?
Definitely. I think environment is a passionate issue of the young people.
Oh, very good.
The question is then, we need to go into finer details, or we need to see what are the long-term implications.
Yes.
So one example is that we're moving towards an electrical car, away from fossil fuels.
Right.
Does this mean then that we are lowering our reliance on petrochemicals as an industry, as a driver for growth? Is that the way that we're going towards, or is petrochemicals and the industry that supports it will still feature prominently in our economic system?
Well, that's a good question. I think on the economy, we will want to move towards cleaner sources. And the petrochemical industry themselves are doing a lot of work in this area. So we will work together with them on this and how we can move towards more renewable sources. So for instance, one of the things I announced at budget is about the circular economy. Because if we can recycle many of these products and reuse them, it will have a significant effect all around. And the world is also looking at this option, so that will be very useful for us to think about. But individually, as individuals, we can do this too. And that is why one of the emphasis we have been putting on is on Singapore Together. And I would say that in many of these things, we as an individual can do something, and community efforts can also make a difference. Every one of us can make a difference. So I have our Singapore Fund, and I hope that our young people make good use of our Singapore Fund. Our young people, I mentioned Cheryl Lee during my budget speech, and she has been doing a lot of work speaking to young people about what can you and I do as individuals to make good decisions and to lower our carbon footprint. I should also add that one other very important thing is that we are investing significantly in our MRT system. And the MRT system has a much lower carbon footprint than individual cars. And those are useful, important alternatives.
DPM, if since you raised EVs just now, and so did you, and it was a big part of your budget speech.
Yes.
And it would seem, and I will use this opportunity as host to throw in a question as well.
Sure.
Clearly, you have a very ambitious goal in terms of having EVs on the road, replace combustion engines by 2040. It seems very ambitious. Is that really the vision, that by 2040, Singaporeans will see almost none or almost all electric vehicles on the roads?
Well, I've mentioned that by 2040, we want to have cleaner vehicles on the road. So in the next 20 years, I believe that technology will continue to evolve. For now, I think EV is the most promising one. But who knows, in 10 years, something else may come out. But we must prepare for that. And at least for the next 10 years or so, if we're able to put out our infrastructure, we should be able to catalyze that development in Singapore. But we must always keep an open mind to other options which may be even better.
Junie,
Yes.
I mean, it's not often the case that climate change is a big issue as far as long-term planning is concerned. But if you look at, let me use you as an example in terms of social services, and as Singapore society changes as well, how do you feel about where we're headed? What are the challenges ahead for you? Because I want to bring back discussions later to SG Together as well, and bringing Singaporeans together. But in your vision, what is the type of social service sector that you want to see Singapore evolve in the coming years?
Okay, so we talked about digitalization, transformation, high tech, but social services is also very high touch.
Right.
So we need people,
Right.
and people are very critical to
Right.
us, and the right people and people who are professional.
Yes.
So the social workers, sometimes I wonder why we do not emphasize or give them more credit and respect that they are really very dedicated to their work. And it's not very natural that a parent would say, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up? And, you know, I want to be a social worker. Yeah. So perhaps there is some way of us Singapore community. You're talking about the healthcare workers as well, how we should, show respect to them, and they're really doing quite a bit. And in fact, the social workers as well, currently. So we see the social and health integrating in the long term. So there's a lot of social and health integration that we are looking at. And so I do foresee the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Social and Family, you know, coming together and talking a little bit more as the community ages and as we have community health. So health in the community as we age, and of course we want everybody to age in place as well.
Yes,
So,
because we're running out of time. So DPM, what I'm going to do is great way to end it. So I want perhaps for you to take in what Junie has said, but put some meat into what you described this budget as being a unity budget, because I think we're sort of coalescing towards this view that Singaporeans need to do more together, as you say, in the social sector as well. So explain for us very quickly, what did you mean by unity budget, and how does this budget actually put us in that road that you foresee?
Yes. So Junie mentioned about this, social workers playing a very important role. And indeed, I have attended many events where I met many social workers, and they have such a heart for others that they're doing a lot. So it is important for us in Singapore as a society for us to respect all our workers, whether they're in the front line fighting the virus outbreak, or they are helping our seniors or helping children. Everywhere, it's important for us to show our respect for the work that, our respect and appreciation for the work that they've done. And on the community side, I have an item in this budget on the Community Capability Trust. So it's important for us to also enhance the effectiveness of what we do and the efficiency of how we do it. So I hope that the social services agencies will make full use of this trust, and that many people will contribute to this effort to raise funds for this. Now, the other aspect is Singapore Together. Now, in many of these things that we do, when we do it together, we achieve a greater impact. And so the whole of society coming together to decide, well, these are the objectives, these are the people we should, objectives, these are the groups that we want to help, this is what we do, and can we work more closely together, whether it's an integration of health and social services, or education and jobs, and with companies and so on. The opportunities for collaboration is immense.
DPM, on that very positive note, we have actually just run out of time. DPM, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Of course, Julie, Taufik, Yuvan, and Junie, thank you so much as well.
Thank you.
I think we can all look forward to even more discussions on Budget 2020 as we go into the Committee of Supply debates next week. Thank you much for our audience as well tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.